Hi, everybody. Before we drift gently into sleep tonight, let us take a slow and winding walk through the cobblestone alleys of ancient Rome. Not the grand halls of emperors or the bloody spectacles of the Colosseum, but somewhere quieter, somewhere cozier. The bustling food stalls of the Roman Suburra, where the scent of roasting chickpeas, fried pastries, and sweet honeyed nuts once floated in the warm Mediterranean dusk. Tonight, I'll be telling you a story of snacks. Yes, snacks. Little indulgences, curious treats, the kinds of things you might nibble while waiting for a friend, passing through the forum, or late at night after a long day of toga wearing and water fetching. But don't let the word junk food fool you. The Romans didn't have plastic wrappers or vending machines. Their snacks were handcrafted morsels made with ingredients carried in clay pots and woven baskets, and they reveal a side of Roman life far more intimate than the stories of conquest or marble temples. Over the next 22 chapters, we'll wander through spice-scented kitchens, shadow street vendors in tunics, and even peek into the recipe scrolls of Roman cooks. We'll meet olive sellers and honey hawkers, amphora-clinking drink merchants, and the gossiping crowd at the corner Thermopolium, the ancient snack bar. But for now, let's begin where all stories of Roman food begin. In the heart of the market, at dusk. The Suburra district just outside the Roman Forum was a place that never quite slept. It wasn't the cleanest area, nor the most noble. It was alive, utterly, wonderfully alive. The streets twisted like the paths of a sleeping cat, tangled and familiar with stairs that led nowhere and bridges that crossed nothing at all. And from the cracks of these stones came the smells of food. A vendor, hunched over a brazier, pokes at a pile of roasted chestnuts, their skins cracked and steaming. He shouts something indecipherable, but his eyes sparkle as he hands a small cone of warm nuts to a laughing boy. Next to him, a young woman carries a tray of libum, a kind of soft cheese bread, barely sweetened with a drizzle of honey. She winks at a passing legionary, and he grins, biting into the soft sponge of bread before marching on. These foods weren't fit for a senator's banquet. They weren't meant to be. They were the people's food, the in-between food, and in their own humble way, they told the real story of Rome. If you had a coin or two to spare, you could buy a little paper-wrapped parcel of moretum, a garlicky cheese spread with herbs meant to be eaten with a chunk of flatbread. Or you might splurge on a skewer of lucanica, a spicy sausage thought to come from the region of Lucania, beloved for its fat and flavor. Children would crowd around the sellers of dulce domestica, dates stuffed with nuts and dipped in honey, and on cooler nights, a humble bowl of pulse, a warm grain porridge enriched with whatever scraps the seller could afford, might fill the belly as well as any feast. There's something quietly lovely about a city that eats together in the open air. Rome did that every day. One thing we often forget is how truly social Roman food culture was. Much of the population didn't cook at home, at least not the poor and working classes. Fire hazards, limited space, and economic practicality meant most Romans relied on neighborhood snack bars, called thermopolia, where food was kept in sunken jars called dolia and served hot from the street-side counter. Imagine walking past one. Steam rises from the counters. The air smells like simmering lentils and frying onions. A man in a tunic leans on the counter chatting with a neighbor, sipping watered wine from a small clay cup. Behind the counter, the cook ladles out a serving of boiled eggs with fish sauce. Perhaps not your idea of a midnight snack, but a Roman favorite. If you lingered long enough, you'd hear gossip, arguments, and flirtations. Thermopolia were not just food stops. They were small worlds of their own. And each one had its specialties. One stall might be known for its panis quadratus, a distinctively scored round loaf of bread, crisp on the outside and steamy within. Another might make a liter dulce, a sort of Roman fritter flavored with honey, pepper, and pine nuts. And somewhere, always somewhere, there would be a man selling the ever-popular garum-drenched greens. Salty, pungent, and utterly addictive. Tonight, we're not just listing foods, we're traveling. With each part of this story, we'll pick up a different snack and trace its trail, how it was made, who sold it, who ate it, and why. And along the way, we'll discover how food connected the lives of Romans from all walks. The baker's apprentice, the senator's slave, the fishmonger's daughter, the gladiator between bouts, because food is never just about hunger. It's about memory, comfort, identity. Even in ancient times, a crispy bite of something salty could be the highlight of someone's day. So tuck in, get comfortable, pull the blankets around your shoulders. We've only just taken our first bite of Rome. In the early morning haze of Rome, long before the temples glow golden under the rising sun, a different kind of sacred ritual is underway, not in silence, but in flour. The bakers are already awake. Deep within the narrow, soot-darkened alleys of the Trastevere district, great domed ovens roar to life. Fires stoked with olive wood and old brush begin to hiss and snap. You can smell it before you see it. The slow transformation of wheat and water into one of the most essential foods in Roman life. Bread, not just any bread. Tonight, we'll spend our hour with a most curious loaf, panis quadratus, a round, deeply scored bread, divided into sections like the petals of a flower, its top imprinted by a rope or string that once held it together. It's a symbol of everyday Rome, a piece of the past so tangible you can almost taste it. And in a strange twist of history, we owe much of what we know about this bread not to scrolls or records, but to a volcano. In 79 CE, when Mount Vesuvius erupted and entombed the Roman towns of Pompeii and Herculaneum under layers of ash and heat, much of daily life was sealed away, as if preserved for us. And among the most touching of these remnants is a loaf of bread, carbonized, darkened, but still perfectly shaped. It is unmistakably panis quadratus. 8 even wedges, tied with a string, bearing a baker's stamp like an edible business card. And so from the ruins of destruction came the quiet whisper of daily comfort. Here lies the bread of a city. But what was panis quadratus, really? This bread wasn't a luxury. It was the workhorse of the Roman diet, especially for the urban poor. Coarsely ground flour, often mixed with bran and bits of chaff, was kneaded with water and salt, sometimes leavened with a sour starter or fermented mash. It was rustic, hearty, and built to last through long days. Some versions included additives, crushed seeds, bits of dried fruit, or even shavings of cheese. But the most common was plain and durable, perfect for soaking up oil or fish sauce, or simply torn and eaten with olives. Picture a Roman child sitting on the steps of a shop front in the Subura, the busy market hub. In his hands is a wedge of panis quadratus, maybe warmed just slightly by the morning air. It's tough on the outside, a little chewy, but it fills his stomach, and it's his. Or imagine a laborer, covered in dust from a morning at the quarry. He leans in the shade beside a tavern wall, tearing into the same kind of bread. No forks, no fuss, just fingers, teeth, and the comfort of a known flavor. Bread was political too. Rome's famous annona system, a kind of ancient welfare, provided subsidized or even free grain to its citizens. For many, the process of converting that grain into bread was part of the rhythm of life. Families might take their dough to communal ovens, where bakers charged a small fee to bake it. Others bought ready-made loaves, sometimes branded with the initials of the guild that made them. And the panis quadratus, with its string score pattern, wasn't just a stylistic flourish. It made sharing simple. Each wedge could be torn cleanly, making it perfect for distribution among family, workers, or soldiers. Let's walk for a moment through a Roman pistrinum, a bakery. It's not large. The walls are stone, stained with smoke. There are millstones for grinding, often turned by donkeys or slaves. You can hear the steady grind, like a low thunder. Baskets of flour sit in the corners, alongside amphorae of oil and pots of water. In the back is the heart of the bakery, the oven. It's round, low, and domed, like a giant clay igloo. The baker reaches in with a long paddle, carefully placing dough along the inner edge, where the heat is strongest. He works quickly, sweat on his brow, arms practiced and precise. Behind him, a boy sprinkles flour over the next batch. another kneads with elbows and fists. It's hard work, but when the loaves come out, golden, crusted, smelling of life itself, there's a moment of reverent quiet. Then the day begins in earnest, but let's not forget humor. The Romans, like us, had their quirks. Bread, it turns out, was often the butt of jokes. Poor bread could be so hard, they said, it might chip your tooth. A particularly bad baker might be accused of making loaves fit more for paving roads than feeding people. And Roman soldiers had their own take. Panis militaris, their version of bread, was often tougher and drier, made for long marches. They nicknamed some rations Panis quadratus durissimus, the hardest bread in the world. It was part tease, part badge of pride. Still, bread followed them everywhere. On campaigns, across rivers, into Britannia and beyond. When you bit into Panis quadratus, you were biting into the same staple that fed an empire. Tonight, as you drift toward sleep, imagine holding one of those loaves in your hand. It's warm, maybe still dusted with ash from the oven. The score marks guide your fingers. You tear a wedge free. Maybe you dip it in oil. Maybe you just eat it plain. There's something deeply grounding about bread. It speaks of work, of patience, of community. And in ancient Rome, it was more than food. It was a rite, a necessity, and sometimes a quiet act of survival. And so as the market stirs and the sun lifts above the 7 hills, the first loaves of Panis quadratus are stacked high on woven trays, carried on heads, slung in baskets, passed from hand to hand. The day begins, and for many Romans it begins with bread. If bread was the body of Roman street food, then moritum was its soul, sharp, fragrant, and unmistakably alive. Moritum. Even the name feels ancient, murmured like a half-forgotten incantation from a farmhouse in the hills of Latium. This was not food for the faint of heart. It was rustic, earthy, potent enough to make a man weep or at least blink hard. But to those who grew up with it, moritum was comfort, creamy, garlicky, herby, and just a little rebellious. Tonight we wander into the cool shadows of a Roman villa's early morning kitchen, where the marble mortar stands ready on the counter, and a bundle of green herbs still dews from the garden. Our cook, sleeves rolled, is about to begin the sacred morning ritual of making moritum. The recipe is ancient. In fact, we have one from a poem once attributed to Virgil, describing the humble breakfast of a farmer named Simulus. He wakes early, alone. His house is still dark, the coals are low, but he reaches for cheese and garlic, herbs and salt, and begins to grind them into a paste. He works slowly, rhythmically. There is no rush. Each motion is part of a meditative rhythm, like breathing or prayer. The garlic crushes under stone, releasing its bright fury. The herbs fold in, parsley, rue, coriander. Cheese follows, white and crumbly, likely a sheep's milk curd, sharp and tangy. Then a drizzle of oil, a pinch of salt, maybe a splash of vinegar, or a handful of crushed nuts if fortune has smiled. The paste forms, green-flecked and glowing. Simulus spreads it on bread. He eats quietly. It's his reward for rising before the sun. Moritum was never aristocratic. It belonged to shepherds, farmers, and street sellers. But over time, it found its way into city stalls, into clay bowls, passed from vendor to customer, often eaten with wedges of Panis quadratus or flatbread crisped on a fire. It was powerful, too much for some. Roman writers joked that one should not kiss a lover after eating moritum unless the lover had done the same. Garlic was its essence, and garlic was not shy. But for many, it was a taste of home. Imagine walking down a narrow Roman alley in the late afternoon. The sun casts long shadows and the air smells of fresh olive oil and thyme. A stall ahead sells small bowls of moritum, with bread wrapped in linen to stay warm. You hand over a coin, dip your bread, and bite. The flavors explode. Garlic. First sharp and assertive, then the cheese soft and tangy. The herbs rise slowly, a hint of mint maybe, or the bitterness of rue. It's rustic, messy, unforgettable. You eat slowly. You don't speak. There's something grounding in this, ancient and modern all at once. In kitchens, Maridum was a canvas. No two recipes were ever quite alike. Some added crushed pine nuts for richness, others stirred in honey for sweetness. A few ambitious cooks sprinkled pepper or ground mustard seed. Region dictated variation. And households passed down their own tweaks, their own guarded preferences. For Roman cooks, the mortar and pestle were as essential as a knife or ladle. They weren't just tools, they were instruments of flavor, crushing ingredients by hand without blades or heat, preserved texture and aroma. And in Maridum, that texture mattered. It was never smooth. It was supposed to feel handmade, as if you could taste the time spent grinding. There's a strange intimacy to it. You're eating what someone else has physically worked into being. Their hands, their breath, their morning, all folded into the green spread on your bread. Let's pause for a moment on a little humor, because of course the Romans found humor even in garlic cheese. There's an old Roman saying, half joking, "Qui placet Maridum nunquam est solus." He who loves Maridum is never truly alone, because everyone can smell him coming. Even Petronius, the famously biting satirist, mentioned garlic breath in his wild dinner scenes. And among gladiators, garlic was sometimes avoided before fights, not because of strength, but because of gear, the distractions it caused among their peers. Yet despite all this, Maridum endured. Why? Because it tasted good. Because it was simple. Because, like so much of Rome, it was built to last. And so tonight, in your mind's kitchen, imagine preparing it yourself. You stand at the counter. The room is quiet. Outside, the sun lowers, behind terracotta roofs. You press the garlic under the pestle, slowly, gently. You add the cheese, crumbling it with your fingers. You pluck herbs from the bunch, sniffing each one. Then the oil, gold and thick. The salt, just a pinch. You grind, and the scent rises like a spell. You tear off a piece of bread. You scoop. And for a moment, just a moment, you are in ancient Rome. Not in the palaces, not in the baths, but in the spaces where real life happened, where food spoke louder than politics, and garlic could conquer empires. There are afternoons in Rome that move like syrup, thick, golden, and slow. The sun spills lazily across the forum stones, warming everything it touches. Vendors yawn behind their stalls, and stray cats curl beneath benches, their ears twitching, in time with distant music. It's not quite the hour for dinner nor late enough for wine, but it is, most certainly, the perfect time for something sweet. Enter the humble yet decadent dulcia domestica, the Roman stuffed date. These were not sweets as we know them now, no chocolate, no powdered sugar, no whipped creams. Instead, imagine this: soft medjool dates, plump and dark, their pits replaced with a careful wedge of roasted almond or pine nut. Then the whole treasure is dipped, generously, lovingly, into warmed honey. Sometimes, just for fun or flair, a sprinkle of coarse salt or maybe a dusting of black pepper to make it sing. One bite. That's all it takes to understand why this was a favorite not just of Roman children but of the wealthy, the travelers, the laborers. It was accessible, but it felt luxurious. A jewel of flavor in the hand. Let us return in our minds to a typical Roman courtyard around the second hour past noon. There, under a shady pergola covered in vines, a woman named Livia is preparing a plate of dulcia domestica for her household. She moves slowly, not out of weariness but intention. She splits each date with her fingers, tanned, calloused, nimble. She slides in a roasted almond, careful not to tear the flesh. Then she rolls the stuffed dates across a shallow dish of honey, golden and fragrant, gathered from the countryside estate 2 weeks ago. The honey clings to her fingertips. She licks it off, distractedly. At the other end of the garden, her youngest son chases a lizard with a stick, laughing. A house slave fans the air lazily. In the far corner, her husband reclines with a scroll, too sleepy to read. It's a small, perfect moment. And dulcia domestica belongs to it completely. The earliest written recipe for this treat appears in Apicius, the famous Roman cookbook. It is as simple as it is brilliant. Take dates, remove the stones, fill with nuts or pepper. Dip in honey, serve. That's it. But what that recipe doesn't capture is the tenderness behind the act. Dates had to be soft, never dry. The nuts had to be roasted just enough to sing when you bit into them. The honey? It had to be warm, not hot. Thick enough to coat, but not so runny that it dripped. And while the recipe suggests pepper as a possible addition, not all Romans dared try that path. Pepper in a dessert was bold, but to those who enjoyed it, it was a revelation. Sweet, soft, rich, with just the faintest bite of spice on the finish, like a secret whisper at the end of a lullaby. Children, of course, adored dulcia domestica, but they weren't the only ones. These treats often found their way into dinner parties, especially in the gustaccio, the appetizer course. Yes, appetizer. In Roman culinary philosophy, sweetness could appear anywhere in the meal. A bite of honeyed date, followed by something salty, then wine, then something pickled. There were no hard rules, only pleasure. And for Roman soldiers far from home, a parcel of dried dates might be carried for weeks, wrapped in linen or leather. A handful of nuts, a dab of honey if fortune or trade permitted. When times were hard, those flavors reminded them of the empire's warmth, of home. Let's visit briefly a bustling street corner thermopolium, Rome's ancient equivalent of a fast food stall. The counter is stone, pocked from centuries of elbows. Terracotta jars set into the top hold lentils, boiled eggs, stews. But at one end, in a shallow bronze tray, rest small pyramids of dulcia domestica. The vendor, a plump man with laughing eyes, taps the side of the dish with a spoon, calling out to passers-by, 2 for a coin. Warmed by the sun, a young couple pauses. They buy a pair, each takes a bite. Their eyes meet over the sweetness and they laugh quietly, the kind of laugh that requires no explanation. It is not just the treat, it's the moment around it. Even emperors, some say, were not immune. There's a story, possibly apocryphal, of Emperor Claudius ordering a platter of stuffed dates while inspecting a provincial road. When an aide questioned the timing, Claudius simply said, "No road is worth walking if it doesn't end in honey." Whether true or not, it feels Roman. It feels right. Because in the vast sprawl of an empire defined by conquest, philosophy, and marble, sometimes the most lasting pleasures came not from glory, but from a sticky, sweet little fruit eaten under the shade of an olive tree. As you settle deeper into your blanket tonight, close your eyes and picture the world's simplest luxury. A plate, a date, a spoonful of honey, the hum of summer insects. In the air, no urgency, no audience, just a pause, a treat. A reminder that in every age, yes, even in ancient Rome, we have sought joy in small, golden bites, and the world has always been sweeter for it. By now you may be reclining comfortably, letting your breath soften as night stretches its arms around your thoughts. Tonight we dine with giants, not the mythical kind, but the real, living, sweating men who fought not for glory, but for survival, the gladiators of ancient Rome. But don't picture roasted meat or indulgent feasts. No, the fuel of a fighter's strength came in the most humble of forms, barley. Thick, grainy filling. And in some corners of Rome, this same food was enjoyed by workers, merchants, and everyday folk. Simple, sustaining, and surprisingly versatile. Welcome to the world of Sagina gladiatoria, the gladiators' porridge. They called them hordeari, or barley men, not as a mockery, but as a statement of fact. Gladiators, particularly those in training, consumed an astonishing amount of barley, mixed with water, sometimes with herbs, legumes, or chopped greens. This grain was their foundation, a body built, not on rare meats, but on the earth's simplest harvest. Barley was not new to the Romans. It had been part of their food culture for centuries, long before wheat overtook it in prestige. To the rural poor, barley was more accessible, more forgiving of dry soils, and easier to store. It could be ground into flour, made into flatbreads, stewed into a porridge, or even fermented into a light, sour, beer-like drink known as cerevisia. But for gladiators, it had a singular purpose: fuel. Let's step inside a ludus, a gladiator training school on the edge of the city. The air is heavy with sweat and dust. Metal clinks against wood. Men, young, old, lean, broad, move through practice routines, their bodies glistening under the late afternoon sun. In a shaded corner, a cook tends to a bubbling cauldron over a low flame. The scent is not luxurious, but warm, earthy, comforting. It's barley, simmered for hours, slowly thickening. Occasionally he stirs in lentils or chopped onions, maybe a handful of chickpeas. On lucky days he grinds in a pinch of coriander seed or mint. The fighters line up with wooden bowls. No ceremony, no indulgence, just scoops of thick, steaming mush. They eat in silence, save for the clatter of spoons. It doesn't look like power food, but this humble porridge kept muscles from failing, bones from breaking, and spirits from collapsing. Roman medical writers, particularly the likes of Galen, remarked on this diet. He noted how gladiators carried more body fat than average, not from laziness, but as a form of protection. Extra flesh helped cushion blows and kept wounds from slicing too deep. Barley, rich in complex carbohydrates, aided this goal. And yet, despite its function in the arena, barley porridge was not confined to warriors. Walk a few miles east into the working-class district of Esquilin Hill, and you'll find street vendors ladling out barley stews for dock workers and bricklayers. Some recipes added a bit of pork fat for richness. Others were vegetarian by necessity. Bread crusts often floated in the mix, stretching the meal for one more hungry customer. Barley, in this way, became a shared experience between the famed and the forgotten. Let's pause for a moment at a tiny thermopolium on the edge of a busy street. A young girl, perhaps 10, sits cross-legged beside her mother, waiting for their daily meal. The vendor, a broad-shouldered woman with ash on her apron, fills a clay bowl with Paul's hordeacious, barley porridge, this time spiced with leeks and garlic. She adds a dash of vinegar for brightness. The girl smiles. She loves the vinegar, says. It tickles her tongue. A man at the next stall, wrapped in a tradesman's cloak, scoops the same dish into his mouth without fanfare. His hands are stained from dyeing wool. His feet are cracked from long walks, but he eats with the same hunger as a gladiator before battle. Different lives, same food. That was Rome. Barley may sound dull, and perhaps to the aristocracy it was. They preferred wheaten loaves, honeyed cakes, and imported luxuries. But in the kitchens of the masses, barley was alive with variation. Cooked thin, it became a breakfast gruel. Thickened, it was cut into slices like polenta. Fried, it could crisp at the edges and be eaten with olives or saltfish. Mixed with beans and greens, it filled clay pots in the poorest homes, simmering slowly all day. In times of scarcity, it was a blessing. In times of prosperity, a base for creativity. And always, it was honest. So tonight, if you close your eyes and imagine a wooden spoon in your hand, feel the weight of that barley porridge, taste the warmth, the slight chew, the humble richness of food made not for decadence but for endurance. It is the food of battle and of building, of markets and of muscles, of morning fog and late-night training. In the heart of an empire known for its splendor, Sagina Gladiatoria reminds us that strength, real strength, is often fed not by extravagance, but by simplicity, and that a bowl of porridge, shared in silence, can echo louder than the roar of any crowd. As twilight falls over the tiled roofs of Rome and the streets begin to quiet, one particular scent still lingers on the breeze, sharp, briny, and just a touch alarming. That, dear listener, would be garum. To many, it was the very soul of Roman cooking. To others, an unforgivable culinary offense, but to everyone in the ancient world, it was impossible to ignore. Tonight, we dive nose first into this infamous sauce, a liquid so potent it inspired poems, earned fortunes, and filled amphorae bound for every corner of the empire. Brace yourself. This is not a tale for the faint of stomach, but for those with curiosity, and perhaps a fondness for anchovies. Garum, in essence, was a fermented fish sauce. But that's a bit like saying wine is just grape juice. The truth is far messier and far more fascinating. To make garum, the Romans layered small fish, like anchovies, mackerel, or sardines, with copious amounts of salt in large vats. They then left this mixture to ferment under the Mediterranean sun for several weeks, sometimes months. As the fish broke down, their liquids, rich in glutamates and oils, rose to the top. This golden, translucent fluid was carefully skimmed, strained, and bottled. What remained at the bottom, the dark, sludgy paste, was called alec and was considered a lesser product sometimes fed to slaves or animals. But the garum, that was liquid gold. Let's visit a garum workshop on the coast of Hispania, near present-day Cádiz. The sun is punishing, the air thick. Large terracotta vats, half sunk into the ground, bubble gently under linen covers. The workers, barefoot, sunburnt, use long wooden paddles to stir the vats every few days. It is hot, laborious work, and it smells, well, intense. Some compare it to overripe cheese. Others say it's like olives left too long in the sun. But to the trained Roman nose, it was intoxicating. It promised flavor, deep, rich, umami-laced flavor. Once strained, the garum was poured into amphorae and sealed with wax. Each batch bore the mark of its maker. The most prized came from specific regions: Hispania, North Africa, and the Neapolitan coast. A bottle of fine garum could fetch absurd prices in the right forum stall. But garum wasn't just for the elite. In fact, it may have been the great equalizer of Roman cuisine. The poor used it to bring life to their lentils and barley gruel. The wealthy drizzled it over oysters and eggs. Street vendors stirred it into chickpea stews. And some even mixed it with wine or vinegar to create sauces, dressings, and marinades. It was everywhere. On bread, over roasted meats, in salads, even in desserts, though that perhaps is a story for another night. One famous Roman cookbook, Apicius, includes over 300 recipes, and nearly everyone calls for garum in some form. It was the Roman equivalent of salt, soy sauce, and ketchup all rolled into one pungent package. And yes, the jokes were plenty. Pliny the Elder, ever the dry wit, noted that some Romans valued garum more highly than perfume. Martial, the satirical poet, once quipped that a lady's breath was more garum than grape. And a graffiti scrawl in Pompeii reads, "Finest garum sold here, will wake the dead and silence your mother-in-law." Even soldiers carried small flasks of it on long marches. It gave bland army rations the punch of home, and so potent was its reputation that even long after the Roman Empire fell, its culinary echo lingered. In fact, many historians trace modern fish sauces of Southeast Asia, and even Worcestershire sauce, to techniques first perfected in garum vats. Let's walk, just briefly, into a humble Roman kitchen. The cook, a short woman with a bun of hair pinned high, is preparing dinner for a small household. She stirs a pot of lentils, adds chopped leeks, a splash of vinegar, and then reaches for a small jar. Then, garum. She uncorks it. The smell wafts out, sharp and salty. She adds just a few drops. Not too much. The pot hisses as the sauce hits the heat. The flavor deepens instantly. To someone unfamiliar, the smell might alarm, but to her it is tradition. It is memory. It is home. And so tonight, as the night air cools and dreams begin to blur at the edges, imagine that jar of garum on a Roman shelf. Small, plain, but capable of changing everything it touches. It was more than sauce. It was a signature, a fingerprint, a way for Roman cooks, rich or poor, to claim a little control over the world around them, to take simple things and make them sing. And whether you would dare taste it or flee at the smell, garum is a reminder. Sometimes the things we find most strange are the very things that made civilizations flavorful. There is something deeply satisfying about a snack that talks back to you, not with words, of course, but with texture, with that first crunch, sharp, honest, a bit noisy, the kind of snack you don't nibble in secret because everyone can hear, at a public pleasure. And in ancient Rome, few foods embodied that spirit more than roasted chickpeas. Simple, portable, affordable, and endlessly crunchy, they were the pocket snack of the people. A Roman answer to modern-day popcorn or trail mix, carried in waxed pouches, linen wraps, or scooped up in little clay bowls from street vendors with singed fingers. And tonight, as you drift into the soft hush of sleep, we'll follow the trail of these humble little legumes, one crunch at a time. To the Romans, chickpeas were called sicer. You might recognize that name from a certain famous orator, Marcus Tullius Cicero. Legend says his family name derived from an ancestor with a chickpea-shaped wart on his nose. A slightly unkind origin story, but it shows just how common the bean was in Roman life, even in politics. Chickpeas were easy to grow, nutritious, and stored well. They were sold dried at markets, soaked overnight in kitchens, and prepared in all sorts of ways: boiled, mashed, fried. But most beloved of all, roasted. A vendor would take pre-soaked chickpeas, season them with a bit of salt, sometimes coriander or cumin, and toss them onto a flat pan over an open flame or into an oven's residual heat. As they roasted, their skins crisped and cracked, releasing a nutty, toasty aroma that wafted through the narrow lanes. If you smelled roasted chickpeas, chances were good you were near a Roman snack vendor. Let's wander now through a late morning market in the bustling Savory district. It's noisy, of course. Donkeys bray, merchants shout, children dart between baskets. But just to the left, under a frayed linen canopy, a man tends a shallow bronze pan filled with chickpeas. He stirs them with a stick, careful not to let them burn. The pan hisses, gently. Smoke curls upward. He sells them by the scoop, dropped into small folded paper cones made from recycled waxed parchment. You take one. The first chickpea is hot. The salt hits your tongue. The crunch is perfect. Satisfying. You don't eat just one. No Roman ever did. These roasted chickpeas served more than hunger. They were comfort food, quiet company during a walk, something to chew while waiting in line, a reward after a long shift. Picture a Roman guard leaning on his spear outside the baths, crunching absent-mindedly. Or a baker's apprentice, pockets full of crumbs and chickpeas, sneaking bites behind the oven. Or an elderly woman sitting on her balcony, tossing a chickpea to a bird, then one into her own mouth. It was a democratic snack. Everyone could afford it. Everyone did. The seasoning was where things got playful. Most vendors used salt, yes, but some added black pepper, crushed thyme, or ground mustard seed. In the eastern provinces, garum was occasionally drizzled and left to dry before roasting, giving the chickpeas a funky, savory kick. Others preferred honeyed versions, chickpeas, tossed in melted honey and sesame before roasting, creating a sweet, savory crust. Children adored those, even when the honey stuck their teeth together. Still others ground dried herbs into a fine dust and rolled the roasted peas through it, creating little flavor bombs that tingled on the tongue. The variations were endless. The joy was universal. There's even record of chickpeas being used to settle nerves. In the writings of Pliny the Elder, we find mention of Cicer arietinum as a food that warms the stomach and cheers the mind. Soldiers marching to battle were sometimes given roasted chickpeas before a fight, not for strength but morale. Something familiar in unfamiliar lands, and in amphitheaters, spectators snacked on roasted chickpeas much as we eat peanuts or popcorn at games today. The clink of chickpeas in a cup was part of the soundscape of Roman entertainment. Tossed in the air, caught on tongues, shared, traded, stolen, they brought flavor to the fight. Let's peek into a small Roman kitchen late in the evening. A young boy is restless. He's waiting for his father to return. His mother, tired, takes a handful of soaked chickpeas and tosses them in oil and salt. She places them into the embers of the stove, tucked in a small pan. A few minutes pass. Pop, crunch. She pours them into a wooden bowl and sets them beside the boy. He eats one, then three, then a dozen. His worry slows. His shoulders relax. By the time the door opens, he's half asleep, warm with the comfort of salt and crunch. Even the language of chickpeas survived. The Latin word sicer passed into Old French as pois chiche, and eventually into English as chickpea. a snack that crossed centuries, evolving from Roman street food into global pantry staple. But in that original form, roasted, seasoned, hand-scooped, it still whispers of togas and sandals, of mosaics and marble, of life lived outside, under the sun, with salt on your lips and something small and crunchy in your hand. So tonight, before sleep fully claims you, imagine a Roman street at sunset. Your fingers, slightly oily, hold the last chickpeas from a warm paper cone. The flavor lingers. The world quiets around you. Somewhere a vendor packs up. Somewhere a dog watches, hoping you'll drop just one more. You don't. You eat it. Crunch. The last sound before dreams. Some snacks arrive quietly. No crackling, no pungent sauces, no bursts of spice or salt. Just a gentle, creamy presence. A softness that lingers not on the tongue but in memory. Labum was one of those. This was the Roman answer to cheesecake, though calling it such almost feels unfair. It was lighter, humbler, and often tied to rituals and offerings as much as to comfort and sweetness. It was, quite simply, a cake of cheese and flour, softened with honey, baked until just golden, and often served warm. And tonight, as your breathing slows and the world begins to dim, let's step into the warmth of a Roman kitchen hearth, where libum rises slowly on a stone tray, filling the room with the scent of baked cheese and love. The earliest written recipe for libum comes from Cato the Elder, in his Manual de Agri Cultura. It reads like a whispered secret passed from grandmother to granddaughter. Make libum thus. Take cheese and pound it well. When you have done this, add wheat flour and mix it thoroughly as if making bread. Add a little egg and shape the loaf. Place a bay leaf beneath it and bake slowly in a hot hearth. There is no sugar, no lavish topping, no crust. Just a soft, fragrant cake, pillowed on a bay leaf, its earthy scent seeping up into the crumb. Sometimes a drizzle of honey finished it. But even plain, it was beloved. Let's picture a scene from a Roman countryside villa. The cook, old and gentle-handed, begins her morning in silence. The cheese is fresh, made from sheep's milk curdled only yesterday. It's soft, pliable, and just a little tangy. She breaks it with her hands, working it into a paste. She adds flour, stone ground, slightly coarse, and a small beaten egg. The dough comes together thickly. She shapes it into small rounds, places each on a bay leaf atop a warm tile, and slides them into the coals at the edge of the hearth. They don't rise much, but their scent, nutty, herbal, faintly sweet, fills the space between her and the waiting world. Later, her master will serve them to guests with wine, but for now they are hers. Though it began as a rural offering, often part of religious rituals or household ceremonies, libum eventually made its way into everyday life. In city bakeries, it became a gentle treat served with fresh fruit or olive oil. In upper-class dining, it was dressed with pine nuts or sweet wine reductions, but in every version it held a kind of softness, emotional as much as culinary. Children loved them warm, especially when dusted with ground dates or herbs. Priests offered them to household gods during domestic rites. Brides and grooms shared them in small slices on wedding mornings. And when someone died, libum might be left quietly at their tomb, one final comfort even in absence. Unlike many Roman foods which celebrated bold flavors, libum was a dessert of restraint. The cheese brought richness. The bay leaf added a woody perfume. The flour grounded it. Nothing more, and that perhaps was its genius. In a world of garum, vinegar, and spice, libum asked nothing of you. It simply was. A warm bite of quiet. A reminder that sweetness needn't shout to be heard. Let's imagine a young Roman man, newly enlisted far from home, sitting outside his tent on a cool evening. He reaches into a linen cloth tied at his belt. Inside, a libum, still intact from the farewell breakfast his mother prepared. He holds it carefully, breaks off a piece, smells the bay leaf, takes a bite. It tastes like the kitchen he grew up in, like quiet mornings, like someone waiting at the door. He eats the rest slowly, eyes closed. The stars above him do not know his name, but the cake does. Even in the fast-moving streets of Rome, Libum retained its softness. A small bakery just off the Via Flaminia specialized in sweet libum topped with dried figs. The baker, a widowed woman in her 50s, had developed a reputation. Her cakes were known to soothe broken hearts. "Eat two," she'd say, "and your problems shrink by half." A poet once wrote her a short verse: "O cake of cloud and leaf of bay, bring dreams to wash my cares away." She framed it beside her oven. Every morning she'd whisper it once, just before lighting the fire. And so tonight, in the hush of your room, picture a tray of libum fresh from the hearth. You pick one up. The crust is golden, faintly cracked. The bottom is stamped with the ridged vein of the bay leaf. You take a bite. It is warm, soft, a little tangy from the cheese, mellowed by flour, perfumed by the leaf. You chew slowly. You close your eyes. It tastes of home, even if you've never had it before, and that is what makes it timeless. Some foods are not meant to steal the spotlight. They don't dazzle. They don't overwhelm. They simply sit beside you, quiet, firm, and faithful. Such were the olives of ancient Rome. Alongside them, pickled onions, turnips, garlic cloves, and even little green figs. These were the silent snacks, the ones that appeared when the real pleasure wasn't eating, but talking. And tonight, as you drift toward dreams, let's find our way into the slow, communal hum of a Roman taberna. Local tavern where wine is poured in clay cups and the olives are always salty. Rome was an empire of brine. It preserved, it protected, it flavored. And in the vast toolkit of Roman food preservation, salt was king. Salting and pickling were methods not just of necessity but of culture. They shaped taste. They filled shelves. They followed soldiers on campaign and adorned merchant tables. Olives in particular were central. Harvested throughout the Mediterranean, from the gentle slopes of Campania to the rocky groves of Hispania, they were as essential to Roman identity as sandals or togas. Eaten fresh, cured in lye, brined in vinegar, or smoked with herbs, there was no wrong way to olive. Imagine, if you will, a slow afternoon in a Roman bath complex. The baths themselves are grand, arches, columns, pools of different temperatures. But it's in the side halls, the lounging areas, where the magic of olives unfolds. Men recline on cushions. Women fan themselves gently. Slaves pass clay bowls filled with green and black olives, plump and oily, glistening in the torchlight. Some are stuffed with garlic. Others have been marinated in wine and herbs. A philosopher dips an olive into a little pile of cumin and chews slowly, eyes distant. A merchant negotiates contracts between bites. A pair of young lovers giggle over a shared dish, feeding each other one by one. The olives are not the focus, but they are part of the moment. Always. Beyond olives, the pickled world of Rome offered endless small pleasures. Crisp onion bulbs, soaked in vinegar and mustard seed. Baby turnips, still with a touch of earth on their skin, softened in salty brine. Pickled garlic, mellowed just enough to be sweet, rather than biting. Even fruits made appearances, green almonds pickled while still tender, or figs soaked in sour wine. These were not large dishes, they came in small bowls refilled often, served not to impress but to stretch time, to give hands something to do while minds wandered through conversation. Let's step now into a modest taberna on the Aventine Hill. It's nearing sunset. The streets outside are quieting, but inside, the tavern, the murmur of voices builds like a low wave. Clay lamps flicker. A table of laborers passes a jug of rough wine. A widow and her daughter share a small bowl of pickled beets and olives, eating slowly. Behind the counter, the owner prepares small plates. Nothing fancy, just a handful of wrinkled black olives dusted in fennel seed, and a few slices of pickled radish. He knows his customers. He knows what they want. Not excitement, not novelty. Just something familiar to cradle the space between words. Romans even believed that pickled foods were good for digestion, especially when consumed before drinking. Wine. Pliny the Elder, our ever-faithful chronicler, notes that olives preserve the strength and clear the mind. Others swore that pickled onions prevented hangovers. Whether true or not, they certainly gave reason to keep chewing, and chew they did. At festivals, street corners, quiet gatherings, and loud arguments, somewhere in the scene, always, there, was a bowl of salty something. But the real beauty of olives and pickled delights wasn't just in their flavor, it was in their duration. You didn't rush an olive. You didn't gulp a pickled fig. These were foods that demanded pause, that drew out the silence between stories, that asked nothing, but gave everything. In this way, they became part of the social fabric. And like all good companions, they didn't try to be the main act. They simply made the act possible. Let's imagine briefly a small family in Trastevere. Evening has come. A mother sets out a tray, bread, a small wedge of cheese, and a bowl of green olives from their cousin's grove. Her children fight over the ones with fennel. Her husband pours wine, they eat slowly, talking about the day. No one speaks of the olives directly. But the tray empties one by one, seed by seed. Later, when the meal is done, the bowl remains. Empty, oily, but radiant with memory. So tonight, as your breath slows and your thoughts begin to soften, picture a simple ceramic bowl on a weathered, wooden table. Inside, olives perhaps, or onions or figs. Something pickled, something small, something meant to last the length of a conversation or a story. Take one. Taste the salt, taste the sun, taste the patience it took to wait for flavor, to bloom in brine. And remember, even the quietest foods have something to say. The streets of ancient Rome didn't just smell like dust and olive oil, they sizzled, literally, especially in the late afternoons, as shadows lengthened and the air took on that familiar smoky haze. From alleyways and market corners, the unmistakable sound could be heard, the pop and crackle of meat hitting hot metal, and floating above it like a siren's call, the savory perfume of lucanica, Rome's beloved spicy sausage. Tonight, as the world outside your window falls still, we turn our gaze toward the flame-lit stalls of Roman street vendors, where sausages sizzled, laughter echoed, and flavor ruled the air. Lucanica gets its name from Lucania, a region in southern Italy known for its strong flavored cooking. Roman. Soldiers stationed there supposedly encountered the sausage and brought it home to the capital, where it quickly became a sensation. But this was no bland link of meat. Lucanica was fiery, fatty, fragrant, a celebration of spice and salt, heat and herbage. Made of minced pork, often shoulder or belly, it was seasoned with black pepper, cumin, coriander, fennel seed, and occasionally a touch of pine nuts or dried fruit. The mixture was stuffed into pork casings, twisted into plump coils or short stubby links, and either dried, smoked, or grilled fresh on the spot. Let's pause in a bustling Roman Macellum, the central meat market. It's late morning. Vendors shout prices. Butchers cleave with practiced ease. Flies dance in the sunlight. And there, beneath a striped awning, a sausage seller fans the flames beneath a metal brazier. He lifts a skewer, 3 links of lucanica, darkened at the edges, juices sizzling into the coals. A waiting crowd leans forward. Coins change hands. Greasy parchment wraps each skewer. Biting into one sends a spray of flavor across the tongue. Porky, spiced, smoky, addictive. Some wash it down with watered wine. Others just close their eyes, savoring. These sausages weren't for the faint-hearted. The Romans loved bold flavor, and lucanica delivered. It was the kind of food you ate standing, the kind that stained your fingers and made your lips tingle, the kind you craved after a long day of labor or before a long night of dancing. Even the poet Martial poked fun at sausage's popularity. In one epigram, he complains that his dinner guest devoured 6 links before even sitting down. The sausage, he laments, did not survive the silence. Let's now follow a group of gladiators, fresh from training, limping toward a tavern just beyond the arena gates. They sit at a long wooden bench, sweaty and bruised. The tavern keeper greets them with a nod and begins skewering lucanica onto iron rods. He lays them over the fire, the sausages hissing like vipers. The men talk quietly about training, aches, dreams of release. But when the sausages arrive, conversation halts. Teeth sink in, heads nod in appreciation. It is meat, it is spice, it is reward. And for a brief moment, the world outside the tavern fades. Home cooks made lucanica too, though not always with the same extravagance. In modest kitchens, housewives ground leftover pork, mixed in garlic, fennel, and salt, and sun-dried the links for later. Some fried them in olive oil with lentils. Others sliced them into barley stew. A few brave souls even cooked them in garum, though the resulting aroma was divisive. Children naturally adored them, especially the crispy ends. Many a Roman mother kept a skewer hidden behind the kitchen curtain for quiet bribes or special surprises. And while lucanica was considered a common snack, some nobles secretly indulged. One senator, legend says, built a special chamber behind his garden, just to grill sausages without judgment. The thing about sausage, then as now, is that it was about pleasure. There was no moral posturing, no dietary virtue. Just meat, salt, spice, and fire. A primal combination that reached into the soul and said, "You've earned this." And on Rome's noisy streets, lucanica told stories of battles, bargains, flirtations, and farewells. Everyone had a sausage memory. Picture now a young Roman couple on a nighttime stroll. They share a single skewer of lucanica, laughing between bites. Oil drips onto the girl's tunic. The boy offers the last piece. She pretends to refuse. He insists. She eats it with a grin. A few stalls down, a drunk poet recites to nobody, crumbs on his chin. Behind him, an old woman buys 2 links for her son, waiting at home. The smoke rises. The city exhales. And so tonight, as the quiet deepens and your thoughts grow slow, imagine standing beneath a Roman arch, firelight flickering across stone. You hold a warm skewer in hand. The sausage is hot, spiced, just a little greasy. You take a bite. The world pauses. For one perfect moment, there is only flavor and a street that feels like home. In every culture, at every time, there exists a kind of dessert that doesn't just end a meal. It comforts. It makes a bad day better, a long walk shorter, a quiet night feel festive. For the Romans, one of those treats was called a liter dulce. Literally translated, it means another kind of sweet. A humble title, almost like an afterthought. But what it described was nothing less than one of Rome's most beloved street and household indulgences. Small, fried fritters, kissed with honey and spices, and often eaten still warm, with sticky fingers and sleepy eyes. And tonight, as you close yours, we'll follow the scent of sweet oil and cinnamon through winding alleys and lamplit kitchens, chasing the sound of bubbling pans and quiet delight. The recipe, again, comes to us from Apicius, Rome's enigmatic cookbook of both the refined and the rustic. It reads, a liter dulce. Take wheat flour and eggs, make a batter, fry in oil, drizzle with honey, sprinkle with pepper. That's it. No exact measurements, no oven temperature, just a suggestion, a whisper, a map drawn in flour and oil. But, from those words, generations of Romans conjured magic. Let's picture an evening near the Aventine Hill. A woman named Galla is preparing fritters for her family. The children are still out chasing one another in the dusty light. Her husband is due home from the mill. She has just enough time. In a shallow bowl, she beats eggs, 3 of them perhaps, with flour and a dash of olive oil. She adds a splash of milk from the morning's delivery, stirring until the batter folds into a smooth golden stream. In a clay pan, she heats oil until it shimmers. Then, spoon by spoon, she drops the batter into the pan. Sizzle. The fritters puff, dancing in the oil, their edges curling. She turns them once, twice, they bronze, not burn. She lifts them out, sets them on a cloth, and quickly drizzles honey. Fragrant, floral, still warm from the sun. A pinch of black pepper finishes them. The children arrive home just as the first fritter cools enough to touch. The combination might seem odd, pepper with honey, but the Romans adored it. Sweet and sharp. soft and crisp. Familiar, but with a flicker of surprise. And while many foods in Rome had clear class distinctions, a liter dulce was universal. It appeared at rural festivals and elite banquets, in market stalls and nursery rooms. It needed no imported spice, no lavish equipment, just flour, oil, and a cook's gentle attention. Let's stop now at a street corner in the Trastevere district. It's nighttime. The market is closed. But one food stall remains open, lit by a single hanging lamp. The vendor, an old man with singed eyebrows, has one thing left to sell: fritters. He fries them one at a time. Slowly, carefully. A young couple approaches, pockets nearly empty. He gives them 3 for a coin. 2 for you, 1 for love, he says with a wink. They sit on the curb, sharing bites, sticky fingers brushing in the dark. They're not hungry. Not really. They just needed something. Something warm. Something sweet. Something alive. Children loved fritters, of course, but so did the elderly, especially the soft-centered kind, soaked in honey and cooled slightly. Easier to chew, easy to love. Some bakers even added extras: bits of date, crushed nuts, a touch of wine. Others rolled them in sesame seeds or stuffed them with cheese. There was no fixed version, no correct form, just that essential combination: fried dough and honey, heat and sweetness, simplicity and surprise. Fritters made their way into festivals too. At Saturnalia, the great Roman holiday of role reversal and revelry, fritters were tossed out windows, handed to strangers, shared without question. During the Lupercalia, they were shaped into hearts or wolves' heads. On wedding mornings, they were often the first thing served, symbolizing golden luck and hot beginnings. And when a child turned 7, the age of formal education, fritters were offered as both gift and bribe. May your mind be sharp, the parents would say, and your stomach full. Let's return one last time to that quiet Roman kitchen. It's late now. Gala is alone. The children are asleep. Her husband reads by oil lamp. But in the pan, one last fritter bubbles. She's made it for herself. She drizzles it with a little extra honey, sprinkles a touch more pepper. She eats it standing quietly in the kitchen's glow. The oil has stained her apron. Her feet ache. But in that one warm bite, she finds a softness the day did not give. And so tonight, as your eyelids grow heavy, picture a plate of warm fritters, small, golden, glazed with honey and whispering of spice. You pick one up. Still, warm. The oil kisses your fingertips. You bite. The outside crunches. The inside melts. The sweetness lingers. It doesn't ask for celebration. It is the celebration. And perhaps, somewhere in your dreams tonight, someone will hand you a fritter. Just because. As the final light of day slips behind Rome's rooftops and the air cools to a soft hush, there is comfort in holding something simple, liquid in hand, a sip at a time, like thoughts gently poured into the body. Tonight, we taste pasca, a drink that fueled an empire not with richness but with resolve. Neither wine nor vinegar, neither sweet nor bitter, pasca was the humble hydration of the Roman lower classes. It quenched the thirst of soldiers, soothed the stomachs of workers, and refreshed wandering philosophers beneath columned porticos. And yet, despite its simplicity, it held stories in every gulp, of marches, of musings, of meals shared without glory but not without grace. Pasca was made from water and vinegar, usually the sour remains of spoiled or over-fermented wine. Sometimes herbs or honey were added, but most often it was served plain. To modern tastes it might seem unpalatable. But in the heat of Roman summers, with dust in the mouth and sweat on the brow, pasca was a godsend. It was clean. It was cooling. And most importantly, it was safe. Rome's drinking water, while often remarkably advanced in its aqueduct-fed systems, wasn't always trustworthy. Mixing vinegar with water killed bacteria and helped preserve the liquid through long days of labor or travel. For soldiers, it became standard issue. Let's step now into the life of a Roman legionarius. He wakes before dawn, marches for hours, under the weight of his pack. The sun is unforgiving, his mouth is dry. At midday, he stops under the shade of a sparse tree. From his leather flask, he drinks. It's Pascha, sharp, tangy, bracing. He winces at the first sip, then drinks deeply. It wakes him. It steadies him. It reminds him of every mile walked, every town left behind, every bond forged in sweat and vinegar. The other soldiers tease each other about its flavor. Tastes like regret, one jokes. Tastes like home, says another. In the city, Pascha took on different meanings. At Thermopolia and roadside stalls, it was served in small clay cups, often slightly chilled from clay storage jars. For the price of a few coins, one could rest, a moment sip and talk. Street philosophers, beggars, porters, traveling actors, they all drank Pascha. It was democratic. It had no pretension. It didn't seek to impress. Some mixed it with herbs, thyme, mint, or pennyroyal for medicinal benefits. Others added a spoon of honey to soften the edge. But most drank it straight, not because they loved it, but because it was theirs. One tale from the satirical poet Lucilius tells of a young man trying to impress a senator. He orders wine, olives, sausage. But when asked what he drinks at home, he mutters, "Pascha." The senator raises a brow. Then why not drink what you are, not what you wish to be? The man blushes, because in Rome, your drink said something about your station. And Pascha was the drink of those who had more dust on their feet than gold on their fingers. But it was also a drink of honesty. Let's walk now into a small home in the Esquiline Hill neighborhood. A mason returns from work. His wife hands him a cup. Not wine, they can't afford it often, but Pascha, flavored today with a touch of honey and sage. He drinks it slowly, savoring the coolness. His son sits beside him, dipping bread into a shared bowl of lentils. The father offers the boy a small sip. The boy grimaces, then smiles. He's not ready for the bitterness, but he's ready for the ritual. Even in Roman medicine, Pascha held a place. Galen and others praised its digestive properties. It was said to calm fevers, ease headaches, and encourage appetite. Physicians sometimes prescribed it mixed with fennel or celery seed, and after large meals, some nobles took a sip. Not because they had to, but because they believed in its balance. It was both cure and companion. And yes, Pascha had its place in history's great moments too. It was, allegedly, the drink offered to Christ on the cross, Roman soldiers lifting a sponge soaked in vinegar water. Some scholars believe it was Pascha, not malice, that filled the sponge. A small act of familiarity, not cruelty. A taste of the only drink those soldiers had to offer. In that way, Pascha becomes more than a drink. It becomes a gesture, a reminder that in the vast machinery of empire, there were still moments of shared humanity, even between oppressor and oppressed. So tonight, as you curl into the quiet of your bed, imagine a cup. It's earthen, simple, cooled by clay, inside a liquid, sour, bracing, clean. You lift it, sip. It wakes something inside you. Not excitement, not joy, but steadiness. The day was long, the path uncertain. But this drink is enough, and you are not alone in drinking it. Figs are a fruit that whisper rather than shout. Soft, yielding, gently sweet. They taste like the last warm light of afternoon. Their flesh is honeyed, their seeds a delicate crunch beneath velvet skin. In ancient Rome, they were more than food. They were a gift from the gods wrapped in leaves. And when the Romans decided to go one step further, to stuff figs with cheese, nuts, and herbs, they created something quietly magnificent. Tonight, as your room darkens and the world slows, let's open a fig together and tuck a little story inside. The Roman relationship with figs goes back centuries, to the very founding of the city itself. According to legend, the she-wolf who nursed Romulus and Remus did so beneath a fig tree. That same tree, Ficus ruminalis, became a sacred symbol of growth and destiny. And from that moment, figs were never merely fruit. They were fortune. They were Rome. They grew everywhere, on estates, in public gardens, beside temples and bathhouses. In the countryside, children climbed fig trees barefoot and sticky-handed. In the cities, vendors sold them fresh or dried by the handful or the basket. But stuffed figs, Ficus farciti, were something special. Let's walk into a Roman kitchen just after sunrise. The air is cool, the tiles still chilled from night. A cook begins her work. She selects a dozen ripe figs, plump dark purple, slightly splitting at the seams. She slices them open gently, not all the way, just enough to make space. Into each fig she spoons a mixture: soft sheep's milk cheese, crushed roasted almonds, and a few leaves of thyme. She closes the figs gently, presses the halves together. Some will be served as they are, fresh and mild. Others will be roasted until the edges caramelize, then drizzled with honey and a dash of black pepper. The result? A dessert that feels ancient and modern all at once. Stuffed figs appeared in many forms across Roman life. They were served at weddings as symbols of fertility. At funerals, they were placed among offerings, a last sweetness for the journey beyond. In the homes of the wealthy, they ended meals with elegance. In the homes of the poor, they transformed simple ingredients into a feast. There was no fixed recipe. Some used pine nuts instead of almonds. Others added poppy seeds or chopped dates. Cheese could be soft and fresh or sharp and aged. The herbs varied by region, and the sweetener, honey, wine syrup, or even garum for the daring, reflected the cook's hand. But always, the fig was the star. Let's pause at a dinner gathering in a small Roman villa. The host, a retired centurion, has invited neighbors for a modest feast. As the meal winds down, laughter softens, wine slows. From the kitchen comes a wooden platter of roasted stuffed figs, still warm, glistening. Each guest takes one. The fig yields under gentle pressure. The filling melts on the tongue, creamy, nutty, aromatic. The pepper on top surprises, makes someone chuckle. No one speaks for a moment. The room holds its breath around the flavor. Then someone asks for another. There's something quietly theatrical about stuffed figs. They ask to be opened, explored, savored slowly. The sweetness is not loud, it unfolds. The herbs, the nuts, the cheese, they peek through, never dominating. It's a dish that encourages mindfulness, reflection. And in Rome, where meals were often long and filled with speech, these figs became punctuation marks. A sweet comma, a thoughtful ellipsis, a gentle period. Even the Roman poets took notice. Horace once compared a good friend to a stuffed fig, plain on the outside but full of delight within. Martial, ever the wit, wrote a verse mocking a noble who served figs without stuffing. As empty as his conversation. It was humor, of course, but it also meant something. In Roman eyes, to offer stuffed figs was to care, to take the time to notice flavor, to bring something personal to the table. Let's imagine now a quiet moment on a hill outside Rome. A young woman sits beneath a fig tree, a basket beside her. She picks one fruit, pulls apart the skin, adds a bit of goat cheese she's carried, in waxed cloth, a walnut from her pocket. She eats. The fig is warm from the sun. The cheese is soft. The walnut crunches. She sighs. No audience. No banquet. Just a snack and a view and a peace that asks for nothing more. And so tonight, as sleep begins to ripple through your thoughts, imagine holding a fig in your hand. You press it gently. It opens for you. Inside, something unexpected, something familiar. You take a bite, soft, sweet, a little wild, a little wise, just enough. There's a particular kind of magic that stirs only at night. It's not loud. It murmurs. Not bright. It flickers. It lives in the spaces between music and laughter, in the smoky light of torches, in the warm scent of something simple cooking, over open fire. Tonight we step into that kind of moment, into the heart of a Roman festival, where crowds linger and appetites awaken. And what better to hold in your hand on such a night than a grilled flatbread, warm and fragrant, bubbling with cheese and crushed herbs? Not noble, not refined, just perfect. The Romans were famous for their festivals, ludi, feriae, dies festi, and they celebrated almost everything. Gods, harvests, seasons, victories, even good weather. These public days were filled with games, music, dancing, plays, and processions. But behind the grandeur, it was always about the gathering. And with people came hunger. As the sun dipped low and the wine began to flow, food stalls lit their braziers. Smoke rose into the night, and few offerings brought a line quite like flatbreads with melted cheese and herbs. Picture a stall near the Circus Maximus. A woman stands behind a stone counter, her hands dusted with flour. Beside her, a griddle smokes gently over coals. She takes a round of soft, flattened dough, already infused with a dash of olive oil, and sprinkles over a handful of fresh goat cheese. Then a mix of herbs, oregano, thyme, and wild arugula, a pinch of coarse salt, maybe a few crushed olives if she has them. She folds the bread gently, presses it flat again, and lays it on the grill. Shh. The dough puffs slightly. The cheese softens. A few dark spots appear as it crisps. She turns it, brushes a little oil on the finished side. When it's done, she wraps it in fig leaves or cloth, passes it to a waiting hand. It's warm, it's crispy, it's melty, it's late-night Roman perfection. Flatbreads were a common element of Roman cooking. Known broadly as placenta or libum, depending on the preparation, they varied by region and cook. Some were soft and fluffy, others thin and crackling. Some were baked on stones, others on metal pans or straight over flame. Cheese was often goat or sheep milk-based, tangy, crumbly, or fresh curd. The herbs, whatever was nearby and in season: mint, savory, coriander, basil, marjoram. At festivals, the recipe was adapted for speed, taste, and scent, because at a fair, the nose leads the feet. Let's stroll now through a nighttime festival, honoring Diana, goddess of the moon and the hunt. Lanterns hang from woven cords. Musicians strum slow tunes. Children run barefoot, their laughter trailing like ribbon. From a nearby stall, someone grills flatbreads. The smell is irresistible. You approach. The cook offers a half-moon of bread, slightly charred, dripping with melted cheese. You bite. The crust gives way. The cheese stretches. The herbs bloom on your tongue. For a moment you forget everything but flavor and stars. What made this snack so beloved wasn't just its taste, it was its timing. It came when the city loosened, when torches replaced sun, when people let their minds wander and their guards fall. This bread, this cheesy, oily little marvel, was the edible sigh at the end of a long, joyful day. You could eat it with one hand and hold a cup of posca in the other. You could share it or not. You could eat it while walking, dancing, or watching actors reenact the myths of the gods. And somehow, it made everything feel closer, more human, more real. Even Roman writers, who often spoke of banquets and feasts, paused to mention flatbreads. Pliny notes their widespread use in daily meals. Cato gives a version made with honey and cheese for festivals. Apicius offers toppings from herbs to fish paste, though that version was controversial. But the grilled version, cheese, herbs, fire, belonged to the people. It didn't need a scroll. It needed only dough, a pan, and a little night. Let's imagine now a girl, perhaps 16, on the eve of her wedding. She stands with her friends beneath paper lanterns. One gives her a flatbread, grilled, still hot. "Eat," they say. "You'll need strength." She laughs, takes a bite, melts a little. That moment, the warmth, the salt, the laughter, it stays with her. Years later, she'll tell her children, "It wasn't the wedding, it was the bread. That's when I knew I was loved." And so tonight, as sleep begins its soft descent, imagine standing beneath the Roman moon. In your hand, a flatbread, grilled and folded, heavy with cheese and herbs. Steam rises, your fingers shine with oil. Music hums nearby. You bite, It is everything you didn't know you needed, and nothing you'll forget. There are foods that surprise you with flavor, and others that astonish with texture. But then there are those that teach you something deeper, not just about taste, but about time. Such was the case with lupini beans, a humble snack tucked into the corners of Roman life, soft and salty, but born only through long, patient work. They were not flashy, they were not fast, but they were loved. And tonight, as your body slows and your thoughts begin to drift, we'll let these little yellow beans walk us into sleep, one slow, softened bite at a time. The lupin bean, Lupinus albus, was known across the Roman world, from Iberia to the eastern provinces. In its raw state, it was bitter, almost poisonous. Its natural alkaloids made it inedible straight from the pod. But the Romans, ever clever, discovered a trick. If you soaked the beans, washed them again, and again for days in flowing water, they would soften. The bitterness would leach out. What remained was a smooth, nutty, almost cheese-like texture, with a gentle bite and a salt-friendly finish. Then they were boiled, salted, sometimes pickled, and finally, ready to eat, by hand, one at a time, popping each bean from its tough outer skin like a secret prize. Let's pause at a street corner in the Roman district of Trastevere. An old man sits on a stool beside a wooden bucket. In it, lupini beans, golden and wet. He scoops them into small clay bowls, handing them to passers-by with a nod. Beside him, a little boy cracks one open between his teeth, flicks the skin away, and chews slowly. The man watches, amused. "Don't rush," he says. "That one bean's been waiting 3 days for your mouth." And it's true. To eat lupini beans was to embrace patience, not just in preparation, but in consumption. You couldn't shovel them in. Each one required a little work, a little pause. And so they became the perfect snack for storytelling, for games, for long nights of talk. Imagine a Roman tavern at dusk. A group of friends gathers at a table, wine cups half full. A bowl of lupini beans sits in the center, glistening with brine. One man gestures wildly as he recounts a story. Another nods, peels a bean, eats it. Silence, laughter, another bean. The bowl doesn't empty quickly. That's the point. Lupini, beans stretch time. They fill space with quiet purpose. They accompany thought instead of interrupting it. Some Roman sources speak of lupini beans at festivals, handed out in paper cones or eaten from woven baskets. Children often carried them to markets or long walks. They were cheap, filling, and fun to fidget with, and in the countryside they were often offered to travelers. A simple bowl, a jug of water, a moment of rest. They were also associated with cleansing. Pliny mentions their digestive benefits. Others believe they brought luck when tossed into rivers during certain rituals. Like bitterness washed away, one old saying goes. The bean in this way became a quiet symbol of transformation. Let's step into a Roman household kitchen. The wife of a merchant tends to her soaking beans. It is day 4. Every morning, she drains them, rinses them, refills the pot. She checks their scent. Still slightly bitter. Not yet. She doesn't mind. The act is soothing. She thinks of her mother, who soaked beans the same way. Her grandmother, too. A ritual passed down, not written but remembered. A patience baked into the blood. Tomorrow they'll be ready. She'll boil them with rosemary, cool them, salt them. Her husband will eat them with wine. Her children will fight over the last one. Even Roman humor found its way to the bean. Writers joked about impatient guests who bit into raw lupini and regretted it instantly. He chewed the bean before it forgave him, one poet wrote, and soldiers mocked their own lack of discipline. We march like wolves, but eat like bean soakers. It became a phrase to describe slow moments, waiting, watching, enduring. But perhaps the best way to understand lupini beans is this. They weren't meant to be the main act. They were the backdrop, the pulse beneath the party, the edible version of a flickering lantern or a familiar melody, always there, always ready, never demanding attention. And in a world as busy as Rome, that kind of food mattered. So tonight, as your breath deepens and the air settles, picture a small clay bowl of golden beans beside you. You take one, press the skin gently. The soft center pops free. You chew. It's salty, mild, satisfying. You take another. The act is slow, calming, almost meditative, and in each small bean you taste time. Some foods are not made for feasts. They are not the stars of dinner tables nor the centerpieces of celebration. Instead, they are the companions, the ones you carry in your satchel, the ones you share on the road, the ones you chew slowly while watching birds fly or carts pass by. Tonight we travel with such a food, a mix of roasted nuts, seeds, and honey, carried in pouches, wrapped in cloth, or served in little bowls at the corner of conversation. The ancient Roman version of trail makes portable, practical, and somehow always comforting. And as you close your eyes tonight, imagine that same handful of sweetness nestled in your palm. The Romans had a great fondness for nuts. Almonds, walnuts, hazelnuts, pine nuts, and even imported pistachios found their way into Roman markets. Alongside them, seeds, especially sesame, flax, and poppy, were used not just in breads but in snacks and sweets. Honey, of course, was the universal sweetener. It was stirred into drinks, drizzled on fritters, and used to coat anything meant to feel like a treat. Combine these three elements, nuts, seeds, and honey, and you get a dish that was beloved from villas to taverns. Nusibus et mel confectum. Nuts, confections, and honey. Let's imagine a Roman merchant preparing for a journey. He knows the road ahead will be long, dusty, and uncertain. He packs clothes, scrolls, a waterskin, and, wrapped tightly in waxed cloth, a small bag of honeyed nuts. Inside, roasted almonds, walnuts, pine nuts, sesame seeds, all lightly toasted and bound together with thick amber honey. Some versions include crushed dates. Others are spiced with cinnamon, black pepper, or ground coriander. As he rides, he reaches into the pouch. A small bite, a burst of flavor, just enough. The honey keeps the mix from scattering. It holds it together like memory, like purpose. These nut confections were often pressed into bars or rolled into bite-sized balls. They could be eaten fresh or dried slightly for longer storage. In street stalls, vendors sold them by the piece. In homes, they were made in batches and stored in jars. Children loved them. Elders relied on them for strength. And travelers, soldiers, scholars, pilgrims, carried them like talismans against fatigue. They were not rich desserts like cakes or custards, but they were honest ones. And sometimes, that mattered more. Let's visit a Roman apothecary. It smells of herbs and vinegar. On a shelf, small jars labeled with names: mel piniarum, honey with pine nuts; mela papaveris, honey with poppy. These were both treat and tonic. Good for digestion, the apothecary says. Good for dreams. He hands a customer a small roll: honey, sesame, crushed almond. The customer bites, sighs. Like my grandmother made, he says. And for a moment, the shop is not a place of medicine but of memory. There's something deeply Roman about this snack. It is practical, of course. High in energy, easy to store, quick to eat. But also poetic. The honey is more than sugar. It is sunlight preserved. The nuts are more than crunch. They are seeds of story, carried from orchard to city, from season to season, and in a world that moved on foot, on hoof, on wheel. This kind of food was not just sustenance, it was company. Even in the grand banquets of the elite, versions of this mix appeared, sometimes shaped into pyramids or wreaths, dusted with ground pepper or salt, served between courses to cleanse the palate. Other times folded into pastries or layered atop fig compote, but the core was always the same: sweetness bound to strength. Let's imagine now a quiet Roman picnic. A family sits beneath a tree just outside the city. The children nap. The father reads. The mother opens a cloth, revealing a mix of honeyed seeds and nuts. She eats slowly, not hungry, just content. The bees hum nearby, drawn by the scent. She doesn't shoo them. She smiles. They too remember the flowers. The legacy of this snack lives on. In Italy, Tyrone. In the Middle East, halva. In India, chicky. In Greece, pastelli. In every place touched by Rome or those who came before and after, this humble combination endured. Because it works. Because it travels. Because it holds its shape. And because when you need a little sweetness, you rarely need much. So tonight, as your breath softens and your limbs relax, picture a small handful of honeyed nuts and seeds resting in your open hand. You bite, crunch, chew. Sweetness unfolds. You are not in a palace. You are not at war. You are somewhere in between with the perfect snack to carry you through. There comes a moment in every Roman afternoon when the noise fades. Not all at once, but slowly, like smoke lifting from a candle. Shutters close halfway. Conversations lower to murmurs. Even the market vendors begin to move slower, their hands lazy, their voices hoarse from the morning's cry. And into this gentle hush comes something familiar. The clink of a cup, the scent of warm spice, the soft gleam of wine held up to the late daylight. This is the hour of mulsum, wine sweetened with honey, or its sibling, candidum paradoxum, wine warmed with herbs, spices, and dried fruits. They were not drinks of thirst, but of pleasure. They were the sigh at the end of effort, and tonight, as your day winds down, let us raise one such cup, slowly, gently, and sip the comfort of Rome's sweetest tradition. The Romans did not drink their wine as we do today. They almost never took it pure. It was usually mixed with water, with honey, with herbs, with vinegar. The idea was not intoxication, but pleasure with structure. Wine was meant to be molded, flavored, adjusted to the mood, the company, the hour. Mulsum was a favorite, equal parts wine and honey, served cool in summer and warm in winter. It was offered to guests at the start of a meal, as a welcome, and often again after eating, as a soft goodbye. The honey rounded the wine's edge, softened its harshness. It made each sip a little golden reward. Now let's step into the kitchen of a Roman country villa. A servant stands near the hearth, pouring red wine into a clay pot. He adds honey, thick and fragrant, collected from hillside hives. He stirs slowly, not to boil, only to warm. A cinnamon stick, a few crushed peppercorns, a sliver of dried orange peel, perhaps a bay leaf for its earthy whisper. He strains the liquid into a glazed jug. Steam rises. The air smells like dusk. From outside, the family returns from the fields. They wash, sit. The cups are filled. Nobody speaks at first. The warmth does the talking. Candidum paradoxum, another Roman spiced wine, was a more complex blend. According to the recipe in Apicius, it includes wine, honey, pepper, mastic, saffron, bay leaves, and dates. It was stronger, richer, often reserved for winter nights or special guests. It was called paradoxum, unexpected, for its surprising harmony of heat, sweetness, and spice. This wasn't daily fare, but for evenings of celebration or cold nights when the hearth needed help, it brought both warmth and festivity. Now let's pause at a Roman gathering, not a banquet, but a friendly afternoon between neighbors. They sit on a shaded terrace. Small clay cups rest on the table. A boy brings out a tray of mulsum cooled in the cellar with a sprig of mint floating on top. Laughter rises. A story is told. A disagreement about philosophy is settled not by argument, but by sipping. The wine sweetens the silence. A few nuts, a bit of cheese. Another round. The sun dips lower. The shadows stretch, and the warmth in the cup mirrors the one now blooming inside each guest. Even in simpler homes, sweetened wine was a kind of gentle luxury. One didn't need fine amphorae or imported spices, just leftover wine, a spoon of honey, and whatever. Herbs grew nearby. A widow in a modest apartment might warm her cup with a rosemary sprig. A dock worker might drink his mulsum chilled from a water basin. A poet, short on coin but long on dreams, might drizzle a spoonful of honey into sour wine and sip it slowly, composing verses between sips. The point was not perfection, it was presence. Let's not forget the role of such drinks in Roman medicine. Galen, the famed physician, often prescribed wine with honey for ailments ranging from chills to melancholy. Spiced syrups were given to aid digestion, to calm coughs, to lift moods. Even in the military, watered-down sweet wine, Pasca's fancier cousin, was issued for recovery. It was believed to revive the weary and sharpen the senses. Wine, to the Romans, was not just indulgence, it was remedy, ritual, and in the best cases, both. Now picture a vendor in the Forum Boarium, Rome's cattle market. He doesn't sell meat. He sells a drink, a steaming jug, a ladle, clay cups lined neatly. Mulsum, he calls. Warm your voice, sweeten your story. Merchants stop. Travelers pause. A senator in disguise, perhaps, takes a cup in secret. The drink is thick, fragrant. The sweetness dances on the tongue. For a moment, the noise of the market fades. One sip can do that. And so tonight, in your own quiet corner of the world, imagine holding such a cup. It's warm in your hands. You raise it slowly. Sip. The flavor is soft, spiced, sweet. It calms the day behind you. It welcomes the dreams ahead. And though you are not in Rome, though centuries separate us, in that one moment of stillness, we drink together. There's something wonderfully human about eating with your hands. Not in a feast, not at a table, but while moving, on the way to work, during a market errand, or perched casually on a stone wall watching strangers pass by. The Romans understood this deeply. Though often thought of as grand banquet eaters reclining on couches, in truth, much of Roman life happened on the move. And for that, they needed food that traveled with them, sturdy, filling, and preferably wrapped in dough. Tonight, we explore the world of Roman handheld food, stuffed pastries, savory turnovers, and miniature pies. A kind of ancient fast food, filled not with grease and regret, but with practicality and flavor. The Roman kitchen, especially in the homes of the working class, was designed for efficiency. Many people, particularly those living in insulae, apartment blocks, lacked proper kitchens. Fire risks and limited space meant much of their cooking came from the thermopolium or the bakery. But when they did cook, they often prepared food that could last a day or two, be eaten cold and carried easily. Enter the stuffed pastry. These were often simple flatbreads or pies, folded over fillings and baked in communal ovens. Known by many names, tracta, placenta, ofeli, they came in shapes and sizes to suit every hand. The dough was made from coarse flour, sometimes enriched with oil or cheese. It was rolled thin, folded over a filling, sealed and baked until crisp. Fillings ranged from the modest to the indulgent, cheese and herbs for a light snack, chopped olives, onions, and hard-boiled egg for something heartier, ground meat spiced, with cumin and pepper, often for soldiers or dock workers, mashed lentils or chickpeas flavored with garum for vegetarians or the budget-conscious, figs or dates wrapped in dough and baked with honey for children, or anyone with a sweet tooth. These were not food for show. They were food for the street, the road, the work site, the temple steps. Let's walk beside a young delivery boy in the Sabura district. His satchel clinks with amphora samples. Around midday, he stops near a public fountain, unwraps a cloth from his belt and reveals 2 small pies, one savory, one sweet. He bites the first crumbly crust, soft center, rich with leek and cheese. The second waits patiently. Around him, others do the same. A woman feeding pigeons from the steps of a temple. A man hauling bricks, seated for a moment's rest. Even a pair of bathhouse attendants, laughing over a shared fig-stuffed pastry. It's a lunch break, but also a quiet ritual, every bite connecting them to the pulse of the city. In the thermopolia, such pies were often pre-baked and stored in warm dolia, large inset jars, ready to be reheated or eaten cold. A typical vendor might offer 5 or 6 varieties. Meat and mustard, he'd shout, spinach and pepper, cheese and sweet date. They were popular with students, scribes, and travelers, anyone with places to be and no time for stews or full meals. The popularity of these portable bites was so well known that even the poet Juvenal grumbled, "In this city, even the mice eat pies with pepper and pork." Let's enter a modest bakery near the Tiber River. It's early morning. The air smells of yeast and ash. Two women knead dough while another spoons filling into rows of circles, one with onions and cheese, another with chopped salted fish and dill. The baker folds them, crimps the edges, and slides them into a hot clay oven. Within minutes, the smell draws a small crowd. By the time the pies emerge, golden and blistered, most are already sold. A soldier buys 3 for the road. A mother buys 1 for each child. A scholar buys 1, then another. Then, after brief hesitation, a third. He says, they help him think. There's something wonderfully personal about food you can hold. You eat it bite by bite. It doesn't demand a plate. It doesn't interrupt. It walks with you. And the Romans, for all their formalities, loved these moments of informality, when food was hand-sized and life could be tasted in motion. Even in the villas of the wealthy, smaller pies were often served during gustatio, the appetizer course. They were called a felle dulcis or a felle rusticae, depending on whether they were sweet or rustic. They'd be filled with soft cheese, honey, or fruit preserves, and topped with poppy seeds or crushed nuts. Served warm, they melted gently on the tongue. But whether baked in a patrician oven or bought on a dusty street, they told the same story, that food didn't need to be complicated to be meaningful. Let's imagine now a quiet Roman traveler, seated by the roadside. He unwraps a small pastry from his cloak. It's cooled now, but still fragrant. He breaks it open, lentils, garlic, parsley still holding the shape of the morning. He eats slowly, watching carts pass, birds fly, shadows lengthen. And in that moment, his food is not just nourishment, it is company. So tonight, as you lie back and feel your own breath grow slower, picture a small, warm pastry resting in your palm. It's perfectly sized. You break it open. The steam escapes, carrying the scent of herbs, cheese, or fruit. You take a bite. The crust crumbles. The filling warms you. The world fades. It's not a meal. It's a pause. A pocket of peace. Before the clamor of the forum began, before the carts rumbled through narrow alleyways and the coins clinked in the hands of merchants, Rome had its own kind of hush. Not silence, but a softened quiet, like the sound of cloth brushing stone, or sandals moving over morning dew. And in that quiet, in kitchens warmed by embers and small courtyards kissed by first light, a familiar scent drifted upwards. The aroma of eggs, gently boiling. Tonight, we revisit that quiet hour, when a Roman day began not with fanfare or feasting, but with a bowl of boiled eggs, and perhaps, if one was fortunate, a little dish of sauce. Not a banquet, not a performance, but a beginning. Boiled eggs, so simple, so unassuming, were among the most ubiquitous foods in ancient Rome. Not just because they were easy to prepare, but because they sat so comfortably between hunger and health, between habit and taste. Everyone, from laborers to philosophers, from mothers to magistrates, had cracked an egg at dawn and dipped it in something savory. In Rome, they weren't served alone. Never just ovo cocta, boiled eggs. No, always with something. A sauce, a spice, a smear, a pinch. The Roman palate, after all, adored contrast. Salty with soft, sharp with smooth, simple with surprise. Let us step now into the home of a mid-level scribe. His name is Publius. He rises early. The air is still cool. His sandals echo lightly on the stone floor as he enters the kitchen, where the coals from last night's fire still emit a whisper of warmth. He places a pot over the flame and fills it with water from a jar. Into the water, he places 6 eggs, brown-shelled, slightly speckled. Not too fresh. Just right. While they simmer, he grinds together a small mixture in a marble mortar. Fresh parsley, a pinch of ground pepper, a few drops of garum, a splash of vinegar, and a drizzle of olive oil. It is green and pungent, sharp and lively. The eggs finish. He cracks one, lets the steam escape, peels it slowly. He dips. The yolk is soft. The sauce bites. The combination is electric, without being loud. This is not indulgence. This is foundation. On the streets of Rome, eggs were just as common. Vendors, with clay pots set over low coals, would sell ovidura, hard-boiled eggs by the half. The eggs were often pre-peeled, sliced in two, and served with a spoonful of sauce directly on top. Some used mustard and vinegar. Others offered pepper and coriander. Many used moridum, the famed garlic cheese paste. And in more daring corners, you might even find boiled eggs drizzled with diluted garum and wine reduction, a salty, funky flavor beloved by some, feared by others. But no matter the topping, the egg was a morning meal that moved with you, eaten while walking, while waiting, while thinking. Now picture a woman named Olivia, sitting on the step of her family's insula. She's watching her son braid leather for a sandal repair, the morning sun just now reaching their courtyard. She has 2 eggs, halved, in a chipped bowl. Next to it, a tiny cup of mashed chickpeas and herbs. She takes a bite, egg, then dip, then a nibble of stale bread. Her eyes are calm, her posture relaxed. This for her is quiet luxury, not silence, but time. Even in the writings of Apicius, eggs find their way in. While his texts skew toward the wealthy, he does not ignore the boiled egg. One version calls for an egg served with a sauce made of honey, vinegar, and pine nuts, sweet and tart. Another uses rue and lovage, offering a more bitter edge. Galen, the physician, also recommended boiled eggs as a digestive aid, especially when taken with herbs to counteract their cooling nature. And soldiers? They carried them, often pre-cooked for long marches. Easy to store, easy to eat, easy to share. Let us walk now into a bustling thermopolium just after sunrise. The vendor, young, quick-handed, and already sweaty, pulls eggs from a hot clay jar, cracks them with his knuckles, slices them, and arranges them on small wooden boards. He sprinkles each with salt and pepper. To some, he adds mustard. To others, a dab of garum mixed with chopped leeks. He sells 3 before you reach the counter. By the time you get yours, it's still warm. You hold it in one hand, your other cradling a cup of pasca. You bite. It's quiet, grounding, real. A reminder that not every breakfast needs to be grand. Some just need to be honest. There's something intimate about the boiled egg. It asks for touch. It demands pause. It gives warmth without weight. It reminds us of care, of someone watching the water, timing the flame, peeling the shell with fingers that have done it before. And in that care, even the smallest morning can feel whole. So tonight, as your breathing deepens and the edges of your thoughts begin to soften, picture this. A clay bowl in your lap. Inside, 2 warm eggs, steam still curling. A tiny dish of herbs and oil, a small piece of bread. You peel, you dip, you eat. The flavor is gentle, the day is young, and you are ready. Every great city has its secrets. They whisper behind market stalls, steam through street corners, and cling to the edges of conversations. In Rome, one such secret came on a stick, hot, sizzling, spicy, held in the calloused hands of workers, children, guards, and poets alike. These were the mystery skewers of the Roman streets. Nobody asked too many questions. Nobody wanted to know too much. They just bought, bit, and believed in the power of salt, fire, and silence. And tonight, we join the line. We take the skewer, and we taste the story. These skewers, sometimes called minuta assa, or simply carnes in veru, meat on a stick, were among the most beloved of Rome's savory street foods. You'd smell them long before you saw them. Vendors worked over portable braziers, turning thin wooden skewers loaded with chunks of meat. Some browned, some blackened at the edges, some still sizzling. The air shimmered above the coals. The smell was intoxicating. The meats, often a mystery. Bits of lamb, pork, or chicken were most common, but occasionally, particularly in less regulated districts. It might be liver, gizzard, sweetbreads, or less identifiable cuts, all heavily seasoned, all cooked fast and hot. Let's walk now through the Kalian Hill Market just before dusk. The stalls are glowing with lanterns. Voices rise and fall. A vendor waves a skewer in the air. Hot meat, spice for your tongue, strength for your night. You step closer. The coals crackle. He offers you a skewer wrapped in a scrap of cloth. No questions, just warmth and scent. You bite. It's chewy, salty, peppery, with a hint of garlic and coriander. What meat it is doesn't matter. What matters is the flavor, the fire, the fullness in your mouth. You nod. He smiles. Another customer made whole. There's something ancient about meat on a stick. Even before Rome, humans had gathered around flame, spearing and searing. But the Romans added their own touch. Spices, sauces, speed. Apicius gives us recipes for marinating meat in wine, oil, vinegar, and herbs. Others mention garum, honey, or even defrutum, reduced grape syrup, for glaze. These weren't dainty meals. They were hits of flavor, meant to be devoured standing up, grease running down your wrist. And yet, they offered something comforting, familiar, almost primal. Let's pause now beside a tavern near the Campus Martius. A group of young men share a bottle of wine and a plate of skewers. They argue politics, brag about girls, tease one another. Between words they eat, chewing, tearing, laughing. The meat is rough, the seasoning aggressive, but nobody complains. Each bite keeps the conversation going. One of them jokes, "I think this was a lion." The others laugh, then eat more. Even the satirists loved skewers. Martial writes of them with fond sarcasm. Meat too spicy to taste, sauce too thick to recognize the cut. Mystery, he says, makes the meal. And he's right. Half the view. Joy was not knowing, not asking, trusting the heat, the char, the cook's smirk. Sometimes the skewers were more elaborate. At festivals, vendors would offer them with flatbread or layered with vegetables, onions, leeks, even mushrooms. In wealthier quarters, you might find skewers brushed with imported spices, cinnamon, cumin, long pepper, or saffron. But the soul of the skewer remained in its simplicity: meat, fire, salt, and faith. Let's imagine a quiet figure seated alone on a temple step. She unwraps a warm skewer from a piece of parchment. She doesn't know what's on it. She doesn't care. She eats slowly, watching the city shift around her. Each bite brings her closer to something steady. The noise fades, the sky darkens, but her hands are warm and her stomach is full. Sometimes that's enough. Skewers, you see, were about presence. They didn't need plates or rules. They didn't care who you were. They were honest in their disguise, a bit of meat, a bit of mystery, a bit of magic. So tonight, as your breath evens and the hush of sleep draws near, picture yourself under a Roman awning, the last orange glow of a coal fire flickering beside you. A skewer is placed in your hand. You bite, you chew, you don't ask. Because in that moment, everything you need is already there. And the mystery? That's part of the flavor. Rome was not always a city of stone and fire. Sometimes, especially in the sweltering heart of a Mediterranean summer, it was a city of juice and chill. A city of dripping peaches, sliced melons, and powdered snow brought down from distant mountains. Tonight, we take a step away from the heat and noise. We walk beneath the striped awnings of fruit vendors. We pause at the whispers of cool water. We find refreshment in the simplest of pleasures, fresh fruit and snowy sweets, because even an empire needs to catch its breath. In the bustling chaos of Roman daily life, fruit stalls were islands of calm. Vendors arranged their wares in neat pyramids or hung them from cords above the counter. Bunches of grapes, figs still on the branch, ripe plums, fat pomegranates cracked just enough to show their ruby interiors. The more humble tables offered apples, pears, and mulberries. Others, more ambitious, displayed imported delicacies, quinces from Hispania, dates from Judea, and sweet lemons from Africa. All of them served not just nourishment, but relief. Let's walk through the Forum Holitorium, a produce market near the river. The day is high. The sun is relentless. Dust clings to everything. But here, beneath linen canopies soaked occasionally with water, the air is a few degrees cooler. A woman slices a watermelon, green rind blushing red. She hands wedges to a small crowd. The juice drips down chins. No one minds. Nearby, a boy sells chilled grapes, not refrigerated, of course, but stored in damp clay pots left in the shade, sometimes packed with straw and cool stones. The effect is modest, but on a hot Roman day, even a little coolness is a luxury. Romans adored fruit not just for its taste, but for its symbolism. Apples represented love and temptation. Figs were sacred to fertility. Pomegranates whispered of life, death, and eternity. And melons, crisp, fragrant, pale-fleshed, were summer incarnate. In the countryside, families kept orchards not for profit, but pleasure. Children climbed fig trees barefoot, staining their hands purple. Elders gathered under apricot trees, eating slowly, saying little. Fruit was not rare, but it was treasured. Then there was the rarest treat of all, snow. Yes, snow in Rome. It didn't fall often, but it was brought. From the peaks of the Apennines, packed in straw and carried down overnight, snow and ice were delivered to the city's wealthiest homes and grandest markets. Stored in cellars or deep jars, it was used to chill drinks, preserve perishables, or create nivatia, Rome's version of sorbet. Imagine a garden party in the home of a senator. Guests recline beneath olive trees. Musicians play softly. Slaves appear with small cups, clay or silver, filled with shaved ice, mixed with fruit, juice or wine syrup, sometimes honey, sometimes rosewater. The cold hits the tongue like a spell. Conversations pause, eyes widen, laughter follows. One guest declares, "Even the gods have not tasted such coolness." And perhaps for a moment, he's right. But snow wasn't only for the elite. In some markets, enterprising vendors sold small quantities, scraped from blocks, kept buried in cloth, to customers for a few coins. They mixed it with grape must or steeped it in herbs or simply packed it into fruit halves and served it like a chilled shell. A fig stuffed with crushed ice and mint. A peach hollowed out and filled with wine-soaked snow. These were the dreams of Roman summers. Let's pause at a modest fruit stall near the Aventine Hill. A grandfather slices peaches into bowls. He pours over them a little chilled honey syrup, left in a shaded clay jar beside damp linen. A line forms. A girl with a flower crown eats hers with both hands. A baker buys two, one for his apprentice. A philosopher mutters that it's too sweet, then returns for seconds. The fruit glows in the afternoon light. The heat softens. Nobody rushes. This is Rome at rest. Even physicians praised fruit. Galen prescribed apples and grapes to cool fevers. Pliny recommended cucumbers to keep the body gentle in the summer sun. Dried fruits were favored in winter, fresh ones in heat, and always, always, moderation. But for those who lived under Rome's scorching skies, moderation sometimes meant 2 slices instead of 3. So tonight, as your day folds gently into silence, picture a table of fruit, a fig, halved and glistening, a bowl of grapes kissed with cool dew, a cup of snow, melting just slightly, scented with rose and crushed thyme. You lift it to your lips, and for a moment everything is quiet. Everything is soft, everything is sweet. Every journey ends somewhere, not always with a door closing or a candle blown out, but sometimes with a soft breath, a quiet pause, and the final bite of something warm, held just a little longer in your hand. And so, here we are. After 21, gentle chapters of Rome's quieter flavors, slower meals, and softer lights, we arrive at the close, not with a grand feast, but with stillness, with gratitude, with memory. Because the story of what we eat is never just about hunger. It's about being, and tonight we remember, the streets are emptying now, the markets are shuttered. The last calls of fruit sellers fade into silence. The coal fires at the Thermopolia burn low, flickering like forgotten stars beneath worn clay pots. In the distance, You might hear one last cup placed down on a wooden counter, one last yawn, final veil whispered through a doorway. Even the fountains trickle more slowly. Rome, the restless, is going to bed. And somewhere in a quiet corner of the Aventine Hill, a courtyard glows with amber light. No banquet remains, just a few bowls left uncollected. Crumbs of flatbread near the feet of a dozing cat. A fig sliced neatly, in half, untouched. A cup of diluted wine warming in the air. A soft breeze lifts the curtain hanging in the doorway. No one speaks, but the silence is not empty. It is full with the echo of what was just shared, a whisper of grilled cheese, a memory of honeyed nuts, a story wrapped inside pastry. This was Rome's greatest gift, not its temples, not its triumphs, but its moments between. The stillness, between steps, the breath before a bite, the look across the table wordless as fingers meet over a shared skewer. No single dish defined Rome, but together, they made it real. Let's walk once more through the dishes we've met, slowly, softly, flatbreads, folded and grilled at dusk, melting cheese inside, pickled fish glistening with oil and garlic, fava beans salted and wrapped in linen, sweet fried dough eaten under the flickering torches of a temple festival, boiled eggs dipped in green herb sauces before the city truly stirred, tiny pies tucked into satchels for long walks down the Via Appia, and always, the wine. Never quite alone, always kissed with honey, herbs, or spice. Each dish, like a note in a lullaby. Each one, a reminder. We eat not only to live, but to remember living. Now imagine the people we've met. A widow watching dawn from her kitchen. A boy delivering scrolls, pausing for pastry. A pair of old men arguing over whose sauce is saltier. Student eating lupini beans one at a time while reading poetry aloud to himself. A street cook brushing pepper oil onto a steaming skewer, smiling as he hands it off. They are not emperors. They are not names carved into marble, but they are Rome. And through their food they speak. And what of us? We too have sat at their tables, perhaps in dreams, perhaps in thought. We've dipped bread, sipped syrup, peeled fruit. We've waited for the egg to boil. We've walked alongside them through sun and shade, and now we sit quietly. The bowl is nearly empty. The cup is almost dry. One bite remains, not the richest, not the rarest, but the last. In Roman tradition, the end of a meal was marked not with ceremony, but with reflection. The secundae mensae, desserts, yes, but also small sweet. Reminders that the meal was over and the mind could rest. Candied dates, cold fruit, a final sip of mulsum, no clapping, no applause, just a lowering of voice, a loosening of belt, a satisfied hum, and perhaps the washing of fingers in scented water. Even in endings, there was care. Let us imagine just one more time, a Roman family settling in for the night. The youngest child asleep already, his hand still sticky with grape syrup, the father rubbing his eyes, setting down a cup of warm wine, the mother wrapping tomorrow's bread in cloth, humming a tune from her own mother's voice. Their day is done, but not lost. It lives in the bites they shared, in the stories whispered between them, in the taste of fig still lingering on their tongues. So now, dear listener, let us rest too. Close your eyes. If you haven't already, take one more breath and imagine that final bite, something warm, familiar, a little sweet. You hold it for a moment longer than you need to. Then you let it go, and with it, the day. Rome sleeps now, not just in ruins, not just in memory, but in you, in every quiet moment of nourishment, in every act of care, of pause, of presence. The food may change, the table may move, but the story stays. And tonight, as you drift into the soft dark, know this: you are full and You are home. Good night.